Across the country tonight, hundreds of thousands of Americans who are out of work will be going to bed, lying awake, wondering how to put food on the table and take care of themselves and their families, how to pay the mortgage or the rent, now that they're not only unemployed, but their unemployment benefits have been unexpectedly cut. Paying unemployment benefits isn't just a nice thing to do. It's one of the single most economically stimulative things that government can spend money on. And with a horribly high unemployment rate and an economy still in need of stimulus and a lot of people and families in desperate need right now, keeping unemployment benefits going is a no-brainer. Democrats have pledged to extend unemployment benefits. Even top Republicans have pledged that their party is in favor of extending unemployment benefits. But it turns out they're really not. Republican Senator Jim Bunning single-handedly stopped the extension of unemployment benefits last month, at one point yelling on the floor of the Senate, "Tough," that ends in it and starts with shh. Now unemployment benefits are being blocked by another single Republican senator. It's Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. For close to 3 weeks now, Mr. Coburn has objected to the Senate passing an extension of unemployment benefits. And he has done so on the ostensibly principled basis that these benefits are not explicitly paid for.
I'm going to stand up every time. We must pay for it rather than charge it to our children.
We must pay for it rather than charge it to our children. That is the hill that Senator Coburn is planting his flag on right now. Yesterday, he told the Hill newspaper that he would object not just to unemployment benefits, but to every future spending measure that isn't, in his words, paid for, which is neat and which would be totally principled if it were not for Senator Coburn's history of voting for plenty of things that aren't paid for. In 2005, for example, Mr. Coburn had no problem voting in favor of an emergency war supplemental bill that directed $82 billion unpaid for dollars toward the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Perhaps sensing the hypocrisy in that, Senator Coburn has more recently tried to explain away that vote by saying, well, he was new to the Senate then, at that time.
Well, I think it was the first year I was here. But go look at who hadn't. I've not voted for one since because it wasn't paid for.
I've not voted for one since. Not voted for one since, except for that other one he voted for. Mr. Coburn also voted for the emergency war supplemental bill in 2006, which is also a multi-billion-dollar bill that was not paid for. See, there it is. Coburn, our Oklahoma. Yay. Senator Coburn also voted for the bank bailout, despite a lack of spending offsets for that. He voted for tax cuts that just got tacked onto the deficit without offsets. He has done this a lot. Earlier this year, when the Senate voted on instituting pay-as-you-go rules, the concept that he says he supports of not spending without offsetting the spending, except in emergencies, Senator Everything Must Be Paid For Coburn voted no on that. Senator Everything Must Be Paid For voted no on the legislation that requires stuff to be paid for. So when Senator Coburn says he is blocking unemployment benefits or blocking funding for wounded veterans caregivers like he did last year, or anything else that he now says he's going to block, not because he wants to block those things, but because of his unyielding principle that he won't vote for anything that isn't paid for, when he says that, he doesn't really mean it. He's voted for plenty that wasn't paid for. But the senator has not let that hypocritical record get in the way of feeling great about himself for standing on his fake principles. He told the Hill newspaper about himself yesterday, quote, "The easiest thing in the world is to pass this bill unpaid for. But consider the millions of Americans whose financial futures would be damaged versus the relatively small amount of people who will be affected by this delay. Now you tell me which vote takes the most courage." Here's a hint. If you're complimenting yourself on your own courage, something else might be at work here other than just your sheer, selfless, humble bravery. Last summer, you may recall, Senator Coburn's housemate at the C Street House, Senator John Ensign, admitted having an extramarital affair with his staffer's wife, who was also his staffer. You may also recall that Senator Coburn got wrapped up right in the middle of that whole thing because of allegations that he secretly helped negotiate a cash payoff, essentially hush money, to be paid by John Ensign to the mistress and her family. At the time, Mr. Coburn categorically denied doing any such thing. He told reporters, quote, "I never made any assessment of paying anybody anything. Those are untruths. Those are absolute untruths." That was Mr. Coburn's official line. until he finally decided to come clean to the New York Times a few months later, acknowledging to the Times in October that he was, in fact, Mr. Enson's affair intermediary, despite his earlier vehement, self-righteous categorical denials of that. Senator Coburn was, in fact, the personal negotiator for Senator Ensign in the hush money discussions with the mistress's lawyer. In fact, Mr. Coburn is the one who personally rejected an $8.5 million settlement request from the mistress's lawyer, describing it as ridiculous. Despite being up to his eyeballs in the classy details of this deal by a married sitting senator to pay off his secret mistress, who he was still sleeping with at the time, Senator Coburn also found it in his heart to cast himself again as the upstanding, heroic man of virtue who no one should dare question about his involvement in what he definitely was involved in. He told reporters in July, quote, "I was counseling Senator Ensign as a physician and as an ordained deacon. That is privileged communication that I will never reveal to anybody, not to the Ethics Committee, not to a court of law, not to anybody." It's heroic, right? Tom Coburn providing mistress payoff haggling services in his capacity as a deacon. In his capacity as a physician, Tom Coburn providing obstetrical and gynecological advice to Senator John Ensign, bravely refusing to disclose anything about those conversations. Actually, Senator Coburn about-faced on that, too. He happily told the New York Times how stupid John Ensign had been and how Senator Ensign's judgment had been impaired by his arrogance. So much for never disclosing anything to anybody. Totally regardless of the Ensign affair, Mr. Coburn's time living at C Street has also put him at the center of an ethics and IRS complaint concerning that house. It alleges that C Street residents, like Senator Coburn, have been receiving way below market value, subsidized rent for a long time now. Instead of paying about $4,000 a month, which seems to be the going rate for the kinds of digs and kinds of services that C Street residents receive, they've only reportedly been paying $950 a month. A spokesman for Senator Coburn confirming to us that he pays not much more than $10,000 per year, which would be about $833 per month. The senator's spokesman's statement to us was that he pays more than $10,000 a year. Now, perhaps as a result of all of our questions about this, Senator Coburn has now gone out of the blue after me, gone after the way that I have talked about him and these problems on this show. Mr. Coburn told the website The Daily Caller yesterday, quote, "Look at Rachel Maddow. She comes at me on the basis of emotion. She demonizes me. I don't want conservatives to win on the basis of emotion. If we lower ourselves to the level they operate on, we hurt ourselves and our arguments." I mean, he does have a point. I am notoriously histrionic. And he is so calm, so cool, so even keel.
I can't tell you how worried I am about what this bill is going to do to my senior patients. I have a message for you. You're going to die sooner. What the American people ought to pray is that somebody can't make the vote tonight. That's what they ought to pray.
I have been known to burst into tears randomly just for fun. But Senator Coburn is the guy who's urging people to pray that a fellow senator might die, or at least be incapacitated, ahead of the health reform vote last December. Before that, we heard him telling seniors that they're going to die if health reform passes. During the Senate confirmation hearing for Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts in 2005, Senator Coburn, who again now accuses me of being too emotional, managed to pick his head up from the crossword puzzle that he was ostentatiously working on during the hearing long enough to give this assessment of our current politics.
When I ponder our country and its greatness, its weaknesses, its potential, my heart aches for less divisiveness, less polarization, less finger pointing, less bitterness, less mindless partisanship, which at times sounds almost hateful to the ear of Americans.
Noble sentiment, hard to take from the guy who prays for fellow senators to die ahead of votes and tells seniors they're going to die because of health reform. Senator, I understand you are an emotional guy. I don't begrudge you that. I actually sort of admire that. But I think you might be projecting here. I don't feel at all emotional about you. I just want to know how you can stop people's desperately needed unemployment benefits by claiming a moral high ground principle of not voting for things that aren't paid for when you voted for plenty of things that aren't paid for. I want to know, Senator, who pays your rent? If you just live in this humble one bedroom and one bathroom, I want to know what room you were sitting in at C Street when you were John Ensign's financial negotiator for secretly paying off his mistress. It's not personal, Senator. I feel no emotion about it. I am reporting on your record, and this is what that feels like.